Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast, where we empower you to build a better ranch and transform your operations into a thriving business. I'm your host, John Haskell. Let's get started. Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast. I am here today with Julie Davidson, who is going to talk to us about insurance. Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Julie, I wanted to get you on here to talk a little about what you do for work. You have a number of different jobs, but the one that is of most interest today is as an insurance auditor. So we're going to get into that in a minute and talk about insurance. Would you give us a little bit of background about yourself? You're kind of a neighbor of mine down here, so give us a little introduction.
Sure. So I've grown up and spent my adult life immersed in the ag world in some form or another. I've been in Wyoming for off and on for over 30 years as my full-time residence, and I've always in some realm been involved with ag and insurance usually. I'm a farm ranch specialist for a large insurer here in the U.S., and I recently started insurance consulting business called High Country Coverage Consulting. And that kind of grew out of a need that I've seen in common with a lot of customers in a lot of different states. But the rest of my background in insurance, I was a claims adjuster for many, many years in a very large rural territory, which gave me great exposure to all kinds of good folks in ag, and then also to all kinds of really out there insurance claims. And then just, the tragic home fires, large losses, things like that. I've handled property and casualty on the commercial side as well, and just kind of have a pretty broad range of experience there. And then I've been a producer in 4 states in the Mountain West here, South Dakota, Montana, Colorado, and Wyoming for about the last 6 years. And I've focused primarily on farm ranch coverage there as well, primarily because that's where my heart is and where my interest lies. But I really handle all types of insurance now.
And as an adjuster, you must get to see all kinds of different situations. So the adjuster shows up when we have a claim, right? That's the person who comes out, takes a look around, and then helps figure out what's covered, what isn't, and then what the coverage would be, correct?
That's correct. And then they explain the claim process, hopefully, and they're kind of your liaison, making sure you understand what's available to you and the process to recover from the unexpected event.
Yeah, interesting. All right, sounds good. Let's talk about your consulting service, because that's the one that is probably of most interest to our clients. How does that work? Tell us what you do there.
So what I will do, I will have an initial call with someone who has an insurance need, and not meaning a sales need at all, but just the commonality I see a lot is people either not understanding their coverage, wondering why their premiums have gone skyrocketing high, and missing that piece of having an annual review at least with their insurance agent. So I would have an initial call, find out what their concerns are or what is going on, if they need better understanding, if they need suggestions on how to go about shopping around for, with different rates. Any of those things, or especially understanding the claim process. That if you have a large loss, especially, that can be a really daunting process. So whatever their need is, it may end with that call. They may just have a simple question, or they may want to send me their insurance coverage information to have me look over it and evaluate it. And I really enjoy doing that because, the track record for finding really good savings opportunities, about an average of 30% is where I'm at so far, is really fun. It's really good to
love it.
Save people money.
Right. And then how about when we, year to year, lots of things change. Funny enough, you and I, or not you, I talked with my insurance, I know last year 2 different times. One when we had our fire right above our house here, and the other time was when we had fire in a nearby where we keep some cattle. Those are times when it's always good to figure out, like, what is covered, how much is covered, how is the payment decided, that sort of thing. As we're changing our operations year to year, buying and selling equipment, buying and selling livestock, sometimes things will get missed, right? And I think we've all had the at some point had the opportunity to, have some kind of loss, and then only to find out later that that wasn't actually covered. Those are the types of things you're looking for, right?
Exactly. And a common problem I see with a lot of agents, especially in areas where there's a few farm ranch needs, but not a huge amount of ag in the area, or maybe that agency doesn't focus on a lot of ag. That agent is not going to be an expert,
Right.
on farm ranch coverage. And if 5 to 10 of their customers are large ag customers, that might be a very small portion of their book. So, they're not necessarily focused on being a specialist because farm ranch coverage is a broad animal. I mean, it is a lot of really important details and just a pretty big scope of issues and a lot of money at stake in equipment and livestock. And you just don't want any surprises when you need your coverage.
Right. And I think some of those are surprises in the sense of maybe we bought something new and it didn't get added on. And then, of course, the other is I've got a 40-year-old piece of equipment out sort of rotting in a pasture somewhere, and we're still paying premium on that when
Exactly.
really all it is worth scrap.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I have found really consistently a lot of customers have had the same agent, and maybe dad had the same agent. So they just stayed, when they took over the farm or the ranch, they just stayed with that same agent and trusted that, the coverage was appropriate to what their need is. And that is a dangerous place to be in because, like you said, your equipment changes. You may not have a good understanding of your coverage. Do you have actual cash value coverage on your equipment? Or do you have replacement cost? And was your replacement cost, did it consider in that replacement cost level the fact that you need to be looking at the price 5 years from now, so that if your loss happens in 4 or 5 years, your replacement cost is based on current amounts, basically. A lot of people don't understand the difference between named peril coverage and accidental direct physical loss coverage. And, I won't geek out here for everyone, but if that's something that we can talk about and I can explain those differences, in a call or if someone is concerned about that, or unless you want me to go into those differences. But I see a lot of instances of coverage not being appropriate for the operation. I think a big one, and it's not a huge expense, but a big one I always see is, and I think we talked about this, operations that really don't do any spraying aside
Yes.
from riding around on the four-wheeler spraying thistles or whatever. And they've been paying for 20 years for overspray coverage that they do not need. Not to fault agents at all, but I think a lot of agents are just like, well, I don't know if they do this or not. I'm going to add it. It's not an expensive coverage. And enough of those things add up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And as you say, over the last 5 years or so, prices, as with all things, continue to go up, right? That's just the way of the world right now. Struggling to break into the tight-knit world of ranching? Connect, compete, and grow with our new networking platform. Real ranchers, real insights, real opportunities. Visit ranching.fyi and click forums. I'd like to talk a little, if we could, about livestock insurance. I feel like this is one that's fairly well, misunderstood. Could you give us a little of the general ideas about covering livestock?
Yes. And these will be general. It does vary by company, so keep that in mind. So probably the most common coverage I see utilized or purchased, I don't know that I've ever had anybody actually use it, is coverage for death loss on the road of livestock.
Yeah.
I think the reason most people are like, yeah, add it, it's like $50, typically between 50 and 100 for the whole year, for that coverage. So, but then I've had people that have paid for it for years and then they lose, a calf or whatever on the highway and then they decide not to claim it anyway. So you have it there and you're not paying a lot for it and you do have the option to use it. So that is one kind of small area of coverage. You, of course, can get coverage for your entire herd or sections of your herd or specific bulls. I would say a cautionary note on that. A lot of times people will say, well, I have blanket coverage. I'm in good shape because that covers everything. And that is too broad a statement.
Yeah.
Even blanket coverage has sublimits for many, many categories. So, for instance, right now, a lot of companies have not updated their coverage to keep pace with what the crazy beef market's doing. And their limit under their blanket might be $1,500 a head or $2,000 a head. And that's not all that helpful right now.
For most of us, that doesn't cover cull price of the cow even, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Exactly. So with blanket coverage, especially not just with livestock, you really need to have an understanding of those sublimits for hay and equipment and, especially livestock, but just make sure you have a good understanding of that.
Okay. Very good. How about liability insurance? Let's talk a little. And again, to be clear on the livestock insurance you don't do any kind of price insurance or that sort of thing, right? There's no market. You don't do LRP and those types of insurance.
I don't sell those types of insurance. I am trying to educate myself on that because I do get a lot of questions on that. And it is a pretty large animal
Yeah.
to get your mind around.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about liability insurance. What are some major concerns that things that we need to think about there?
Okay,
This is
sure.
one we talk about a lot with our customers.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because it is an enormous part of your risk. So we'll talk about it first with vehicle coverage, whether it's your personal private passenger vehicle or if it's, your farm truck that you're driving down the road, whatever. You need to understand the value of having adequate liability limits for what's called the underlying coverage. So the underlying coverage is the coverage that applies specifically to that vehicle. And with a lot of companies, you have to have your liability limit set at a specific level in order to be able to add a liability umbrella, which is incredibly important also. And we can touch on that here in a minute. So the lowest I would ever recommend someone going with their auto liability coverage for either personal use or farm ranch use would be $250,000 per person. $500,000 would be the aggregate amount for one accident. And then it's your choice, 100,000, 250,000, either one would be appropriate for property damage. Because if you injure someone, if you are hauling grain and lose your brakes or whatever, and you have injured people in another vehicle and you are found at fault for that accident, each injured person will have a claim to submit against you. And their claim is going to include medical expenses all the way through their entire recovery, lost wages for time they had to miss off work, pain and suffering, change in lifestyle for the family. Maybe they had to miss a trip or someone couldn't go to college because of their injury or whatever. So all of those things will be combined and a settlement amount will be reached. And once that settlement amount is awarded, you have to pay it. Somehow that family has to be made whole. So that is where the value of the liability umbrella comes in. So let's say you have those limits that I recommended with the $500,000 total for one accident. Okay. And they're awarded $1 million settlement because this has really impacted their life. Maybe some life-changing injuries are involved. So without that umbrella and that $1 million settlement happens, you can say, well, my carrier will pay $500,000 towards this accident. I will pay the other $500,000 out of pocket. And if you can't do that and you have no umbrella in place, you then are faced with depleting your savings or selling half your herd or lifelong garnishment. Somehow that has to be recovered for those injured people. So with the liability umbrella in place, what that does for you, and it depends on how your ranch or farm is structured. If everything is held in your name personally, your personal liability umbrella policy can have coverage extend to your farm ranch policy and all your vehicles. If you are in an LLC or incorporated or something like that, you can have basically the same thing. It's just considered a commercial umbrella.
Yeah.
So what that does for you, the minimum amount for an umbrella with the company that I work with currently is $1 million. And then, you can go up pretty high. But let's say you have that $1 million umbrella in place and that same accident happened. you could say, no problem. My carrier will pay $500,000 for my auto coverage. They'll get the other $500,000 from my $1 million umbrella. You can sleep at night because you're not faced with picking which agony you're going to endure to
Right.
get paid. And your people that unfortunately were injured have gotten what they have requested.
Yeah. Okay, good. And important in this, I think, is that we really see that this becomes kind of an interlocking system of, whatever company insurance we might have, whatever private and personal insurance we have, the structure of the entities and how things are owned. Those things all wind up kind of coming together to, just as you're saying, help people that are injured in the case of an accident, but also to protect, our ability to pay and keep us from winding up in that very bad situation of having to liquidate or do something drastic in order to settle that claim.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then still on the liability note, I get a lot of questions from folks who don't really understand when their premises liability coverage would be used and how that may apply. They know
Yeah.
they need it. They're all smart. They all know they need it, but not everyone, fortunately, not everyone has had to use it or even known anyone who had to use it. So I'll just touch on that. There are a couple of ways that your liability coverage can be used. Let's say an accident happens and someone is injured on the ranch somewhere. In order for you to be held liable for any type of damage or injury, you have to have contributory negligence. So you have to have some role that you have played that created a condition where that injury occurred. If that does not exist, if you do not appear to have more than 50% of the negligence, they can still sue you, and many people likely would, but your coverage would be used in a different way if your claims folks have evaluated that and determined our insured was not at fault. You were trespassing, or they don't even know you and you were on their property by accident and hunting and fell in a hole or whatever.
Yep. Oh,
They,
I've had a bunch of these types of things. My
yeah,
goodness. When a trespasser sues, it's like, you got to be kidding, right?
yeah, exactly. But it happens a lot. So in that case, your claims folks would evaluate, and if they say, nope, our insured is not at fault in this, then your liability coverage can be used for your carrier to hire an attorney on your behalf and defend you in this case. Now let's turn the tables and let's say there was a dangerous condition and, you were having guests over, maybe a field test plot day or something, whatever. And there was a dangerous condition on the property that you did not address. You did not warn people of, you did not make any effort, which I'm sure there's very few people out there that would do that. But if you had a situation that you should have remedied or warned people of and someone is injured because of that, you very likely may be held liable for that. And in that case, your coverage would be used to settle on your behalf. Those folks, their medical expenses, all the things we talked about, the auto accident. So,
And again, just to point out, great reason to sort of clean things up, fill in holes, not leave projects half completed in the yard, kind of thing where the grass grows up over them. Like, just a good reason to keep things clean and neat and keep on top of stuff. Excellent. All right. What else should we cover that we have not already? This is really good. And Julie, I think, one of the important things, we have many parts of our business that we need to educate ourselves on. Understanding how insurance works and what's covered is kind of a big job, and you helping us do that is really good. I appreciate that, because we all know we need to have insurance, but boy, once you open this can of worms, it seems like it goes crazy. What else should we talk about that we haven't yet? And we can then wrap up after that, I think.
yeah, I would just share it's really important and can really affect your premiums and your rates to understand how an insurance score works.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'm really glad you brought this up.
Yeah, no problem. There's about 26 factors that go into building a person's insurance score. And we don't get to see all of those factors as producers. But when I quote someone and their rate comes up astronomically high, I instantly know there's some kind of issue going on with their score. And a lot of times when we look at their loss history, we'll see just a plethora of claims in the last few years. I've had people have as many as 20 claims in 2 years, little rock chips and all the things, towing and labor, all the things that they're not even aware count as claims. So claim frequency, credit score, how often you change carriers. There's just a lot of things that go into developing that score, and that is where your rate is driven from.
And so this insurance score is, you said credit score is included, but it's a lot like a credit score, just focused on insurance. And it forms one of the major factors in determining what your rates are. So my liability insurance may be one price and yours may be another. And one, if our businesses were exactly the same, our insurance score would be the difference between those. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
All right. And here's the interesting thing. We can't look up our insurance score the way we can look up our credit score, correct?
Correct.
But you've just listed the factors that are there. And one of the ones you brought up in one of our first discussions was this idea of like the rock chip claim, right? So you buy insurance coverage for your windshield. You get a rock chip. I don't know about your car, but mine, I have so many, it's ridiculous, but it usually doesn't take a week after I've had a new windshield installed to get a chip in it. Well, if I make a claim on that, that actually affects my insurance score, right?
One rock chip claim would not, but keep in mind the claim frequency piece.
Yeah.
Those are comprehensive claims, meaning not a collision, considered an act of nature, so that's not your fault. So if you have one rock chip every 3 or 4 years, that is not at all a factor. If you have 6 or 7 in 1 year or 2 years, it really ups your claim frequency because they do all count as claims. And a lot of agents don't do a super job of explaining that and letting people know, yes, you have this coverage, but keep in mind, you don't want to use it 10 times a year.
Right. Which, again, I promise I could with rock chips. I don't know about you, but I think I could do 52 of those a year, one every week.
Yeah. And especially when you have, like you said, the new windshield is like a magnet.
Yeah. Oh, man. So, and then that to me makes me think a little about how I structure my policies. I tend to keep a higher deductible and have a little more cash to pad myself between, something happening and actually making a claim. So would that kind of work the same way where if I'm making less frequent claims because I have a higher deductible in theory, then that would keep my insurance score better? And I don't know if higher is better or lower is better, but it should keep my premiums down, right?
Exactly. That is a big factor. And the other benefit of having a higher deductible, it really can be an excellent way to save on your premiums.
Yeah, right. That's kind of a whole nother piece, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I see that a lot with farm ranch folks, especially the ones that have just left it in place for 20 years and never really looked at it. Honestly have people with $100 deductible on their farm ranch coverage or $500. I mean,
we joke all the time that $1 million isn't what it used to be anymore, but $100 is definitely not what it used to be.
That's lunch some days for some people. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's fantastic. And again, even deeper when we get into things is this balance between deductible and how we're covered and how that affects our premium price and that sort of thing. But that's maybe a conversation for another day that we can get into. So, Julie, I really appreciate you joining me this morning. People can contact you through our Ranch Right website, correct? Do you have other ways people can contact you directly?
I believe my email is on the Ranch Right website. It's just Julie Davidson, HCCC@gmail.com.
Excellent. That sounds great. And tell me again, HCCC is High Country Coverage Consulting. Is that right?
That's correct. And the first initial learning call is at no cost. So
excellent. Great.
No risk there.
Good. All right. That sounds really good. So good opportunity to call Julie, find out if we're in the ballpark. Do we have the coverage that we need? Are we priced appropriately? Could we get cheaper coverage? That sort of thing. Because there's also a lot of variance between different companies in how they structure coverage and what it costs, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Very good. Julie, thank you very much. You have a wonderful day. I look forward to talking to you again.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for tuning into the Ranchnomics podcast. We hope this episode helped you win today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend.